Welcome to Eye Opener Show, and sorry for the technical glitch. Welcome to Eye Opener Show, and this afternoon we will be discussing about a lot of government, laws that have been introduced and acts that have been introduced from the Parliament, and it's been enforced through all across India, and it also looks like there is a lot of pushback from the respective beneficiaries or the recipients of that law, whether it is ANRC, NPR, or whether it is Dalit related acts, or recently, the Modi government, in fact, BJP led NDA government has brought up a very interesting law in the field of agriculture, and that law seems to be instigating a lot of discontent and discouragement among the communities of the farmers. And we can also see that in Delhi, lakhs of people are protesting against the government of India, asking the government of India to repeal the law that they have passed recently, especially on 27th September 2020. President Ramnath Kovind gave his assent to three agricultural bills, one being Farmer Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act 2020, Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act 2020, and Essential Commodities Amendment Act 2020. And in light of these bills being formed, of these acts being passed by the Lok Sabha, and then by the Raj Sabha, and then by the President of India, our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has been tweeting a lot about these acts and amendments that his government has put forth. And this afternoon, we will be discussing about what these laws or acts are concerned about. Why there are lakhs of people in this chilling winter, people are willing to die, come forward and sit on the roads. But in fact, there are the news televisions also telecast that they have 6 months of ration, or 6 months of supplies for them to support themselves, so that they can continue this agitation, they can continue this protest. And internationally, this particular issue has been gaining a lot of traction from the governments like Canada, from the organizations like United Nations, etc., are coming forward in condemnation of atrocities that are happening against the farmers that are protesting in the national capital. So, understanding this particular background, we would like to invite Jerry Thomas and Jayakrishnan onto the panel to discuss what these laws are, what these amendments are, what these acts are, and how does it really either upset or actually encourage our farming community. Welcome both of you onto the discussion, sir. Sure. Thank you. To begin with, let me go to Jerry. Jerry, what do you think? I mean, there is a lot of uprise against the acts and the amendments that we have just discussed, but aren't they, aren't all these laws also beneficial to the farming community? Aren't these really, why should people like Congress-led people, or say any opposition, or say just trying to grab an opportunity to defame the government, trying to grab an opportunity to say that these reformations actually are not fitting to this particular time of the nation, where the nation is traveling. However, why are we opposing the reformations? Reformations are supposed to be good, isn't it? Then if the reformations are good, and these reformations are actually happening for the benefit of the farmers and the farming community in India, why such a price? Why such disappointment? Why such in the chill winter? Why should actually people agitate against the government?
Thank you, Praveen, for that question. You have rightly asked why we should be opposing the farm reform. At the outset, I would like to state that farm sector requires reform, but these laws, these bills that have been passed, looks like a cynical exploitation of a requirement. Let me explain it. If we look at these three bills that has been passed, in one of them being an amendment to the already existing act, the first one, for example, the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price and Assurance and Farm Services Bill. This is basically a bill for contract farming between the corporate and the farmer. Now, the problem with that is this is already experimented. This is already experimented, say, in parts of Punjab. And by that, they have already seen that the small farmers being the 80% of the farmers community, are going to be excluded from this so-called bill at all. Because the companies are not interested in, say, having any agreement signed with the small-time farmers. So this was covered. This is, say, one of the, I am highlighting the plagues that are there in the bill. What the government should have done in this bill, they should have added a provision for group contracts. Small farmers coming together and having a group contract with the corporates. That has been pointed out earlier, but for some strange reason, it is totally left in the bill. So that is one of the problems. Now, that is not the only problem. If you look at the Farm Bill again, the studies that I've done, which is published in EPW, Economic and Political Weekly, which is one of the highly regarded journals in India, it says the price that they receive, the farmers, the even the large farmers who have entered into the corporate farming, they have received is lower than the price that they would have otherwise received if you look at the entire international community. What happened is, when the corporates enter into an agreement with the farmer, they ask for a specific product to be cultivated. Now, that specific product doesn't have a market outside this corporate. So they cannot actually go and sell it anywhere else. So there is no mechanism to address that issue, which is already an existing issue. Again, there is no provision. What if the company cancels the contract, which is a big question. The company has entered into a contract, but they can terminate the contract. That clause is there. They can terminate the contract. Now, what if the company cancels the agreement? Who will bear the expense? Again, there is no provision to address it in the civil court. This seems to be in favor, though it says that it is for the empowerment, it is actually seems to be favoring only one-sided corporate favored bill, the first one. We will look at more in detail later. Say, for example, this again says the quality has to be assured. Now, what if the company comes and at the last moment says your quality is not up to the mark? How will you readdress it? So the first bill seems to be heavily favoring the corporates than the farmer, though it pretends that it is in favor of the farmers. The idea is good, but the bill actually is against the farmer. If you look at the second one is actually, the first one is on the contract farming. The second one is on selling it, trading it. Now, trading it, now earlier you had, at least in Punjab, Haryana, you had a good system of where the government will buy it from you. Now, anybody with a PAN card, you can sell it to anyone if they have a PAN card. Now, again the problem, the same. See, the entire agreement seems to be in favor of the trader rather than the farmer. See, for example, if you have like all of us come from different towns or rural villages, how far do you think that the farmer will go to sell? The farmer will go to sell to the nearest place. He is not going to, somebody in Kurnool, he is not going to travel to Hyderabad to sell it. He would prefer to sell it in Kurnool itself. So you are saying that you can sell it anywhere, but that is only applicable for a large scale farmer. Again, the small scale farmer has to sell it to someone who is there. Now, this has been done in Bihar. Like the earlier contract farming has been done in different places, specifically in certain part of Punjab. This has done in Bihar. And Bihar farmers have suffered. It was done, now 14 years of experimentation has been done. And Bihar farmers have suffered, the revenues have decreased, the price fluctuation, they were unable to bear it. What has the government done to address these issues of the farmers? Nothing. Nothing. In the price fluctuation, you don't have actually a safety net for them. So without empowering the farmer, without safeguarding the farmer's interest, you are exposing them to the corporate this thing, which will result in an exploitation. And the third is an amendment to the existing act that now the rice and all need not be in the essential food at all. You can store it. You can store it, and if the perishable items, you can raise up to 100%. 100% with the base price being the last year's price or the average of the 5 years last year's price. So if I buy it from you for 50 rupees, I can raise it the vegetable price up to 100%. I can raise it to 100 rupees and sell it. Who will benefit? Who has a storage capacity facility? Again, the corporate solely has the storage capacity. Government should have done all this infrastructure. Government should have safeguarded this interest. Government should have taken measures to empower the farmer. Then should have introduced. Now exactly the opposite they have done, and the farmers know it. That is why they are ready to pay with their life to get this repealed from this, because the bills are so badly drafted that you cannot think of amending it. You have to repeal it and probably bring new laws to reform it. That is the reason the way the farmers are opposed.
Okay. So, Jayakrishnan, if I can come back to you and ask the same question, isn't it good for the farmers to decide on what price they can sell, to whom they sell, and why should the government regulate to whom they should sell? Why should the government even fix a price for their produce? If they get a good price, better than the price that the government is offering, and better if they're selling it to the corporate companies, doesn't it bring some kind of a larger scope for the farmers to play around?
Yeah, thanks, Praveen, for that question. That question assumes that the farmer and the trader or the corporate buyer is on an equal footing. We forget the ground realities. One of the problems I find with these laws is not the intention. The intention might be good. We need not attribute malafide, bad faith to the parliament as such, because the parliament is passing a law. Even the courts would actually even the courts do not consider any law passed by the parliament as being done in bad faith. So legitimacy of the law is there, but the thing is, noble intentions don't automatically work out in ground reality. And farmers are the people who always live in reality. Everything that they do is connected to reality. The weather, the produce, their sales, their debts. So they are not living in any kind of dream world. They live in ground reality all the time. They will have minimum savings. Most of them will be in debt. So this proposal saying that the farmer can trade with anyone assumes that he's on equal bargaining terms with the buyer or the trader or the corporate party coming in. But that is not the ground reality. We have seen in every kind of sector that one side will have an unequal advantage. Forget about farmers. Look at employees. Maybe a very highly qualified person, when he negotiates an employment contract with the corporate, what happens? Who has the upper hand there? There are very few individuals, perhaps in certain key areas, or they might have such a kind of CV that they can dictate the terms. But if I'm a fresher, okay, I'm graduating from the best college in the country, and I'm being offered an employment contract. How much bargaining power do I have? It will be limited. It will be limited. That is a ground reality, even for a very qualified, shrewd person. And look at the farmer. The farmer is dealing in perishable goods, and as Jerry was saying, they may not have access to storage facilities and all, so they have to conclude a deal in a pretty fast time. And when they are put into such pressure, obviously the advantage will shift to the other side. That is, the farmers are feeling exposed. That is why they have come out on the streets. They know that this is not going to work in their favor, even though, see, we cannot go by the terms reforms. Just because somebody puts a label reforms, we cannot believe that as such. Whether it is actually reforms will have to be assessed based on what happens on the ground. And that is where, as Jerry brother was explaining, the farmers are being exposed to a lot of forces directly from the market, in which they will stand to lose a lot more. Like they on paper, this might look very attractive, but Look at the weak person. Like if you remember, Mahatma Gandhi had a talisman for deciding any kind of policy. He said, look at the most weakest person, the poorest person, and if this benefits that person, then you can take a decision. So that is kind of a signboard how to make policy. So don't think from the strong man's point. Like who see there are intelligent, shrewd farmers, but those are the minority. They form even in a prosperous farming state like Punjab. Such people will be a minority. They will be able to deal effectively, shrewdly with the corporates. But look at the ordinary farmer, small holding farmer. So that's the problem. So it is not about opposing reforms, but about actual ground realities. And one of the problems, one of the key areas, even before you come to the specific laws, what I felt is the way in which these laws were passed. See, democracy by nature is a very tough project. It is not easy. People get frustrated, especially if you listen to a lot of conversations among the salaried people, among the middle class and up. They are frustrated with the slow pace of democracy. They'd rather have a benevolent dictator who accomplishes fast reforms. But democracy involves consensus building, and I think that is absent in these laws. It was bulldozed through. The real stakeholders were never consulted, and that is why they are angry. That is why they are blocking the capital. They don't want to harass the common people. They are common people. They know how much people get affected when the roads are blocked, but they were never consulted. There is no consensus building. The parliament did not behave like a representative body. This was bulldozed through. So all these frustrations are coming out. And I don't think the farmers are against reform. We should not assume that. They are all for reform. They also want to prosper. But will these laws actually empower them is an open question. And objectively, till now, it doesn't seem so. It doesn't seem so.
Yeah, but Jerry, the assumptions that we are taking that it may not work, it may lead into some kind of error. It may lead into some kind of issue. So these are all assumptions, right? Why don't we just utilize the law and and see if it works or not? Why should we just be so apprehensive about the laws that have been introduced and being apprehensive about those laws, being apprehensive about those acts? We try to we try to misinform or direct people to a different goalpost altogether, instead of utilizing the acts and get benefit out of it. If we go for a protest for about 5 months or 6 months, taking the ration and and going and sitting there as at Dharna Chowk, will that help, Jerry?
Yeah,
Aren't these just assumptions?
very good question. In fact, if you go to PT Ayog website, which is the government website, you will see the reforms or the attempts that have been done to reform the farm sector. You will see state by state. Now, in state by state, when you look at it, Kerala, for example, never had this loss. Kerala never had this loss. Now, does that mean that the farmer in Kerala had all the benefits? Absolutely not. Again, the laws which have been changed, Kerala never had it in the first place. Second, Bihar, for example, which we were speaking earlier, in 2006, they had attempted exactly the same thing, other than the contract farming, as far as the farmers allowed to sell to anyone, with whomever they want. They had repealed the earlier law and they had attempted this. And we have a clear case study of a major state with us right now. And the results that have come out of that have clearly shown, which the government is well aware, because there has been a serious study on that. And the results that have come out and show that initial 3 years, the farmers' income increased. Thereafter, it started decreasing. And now the farmers are in distress because of the price fluctuation, and the traders and the unregulated traders are exploiting the farmers. So you have exactly the opposite of the intended purpose of the law which had passed in the Bihar. So we are not here speaking about hypothesis or assumptions of what would have happened. We are speaking about case studies, real case studies being done. So the question is, when you know this, when you have already done it in different states, in different methods, Why didn't you take the best lessons learned from it?
Mm. Okay.
You should have empowered the farmer. You
Mm.
know what actually needs to be done to protect the farmer from the price fluctuation. You know
Mm.
actually, say, if the farmer enters into a contract, how will he enforce the contract? Praveen, let me tell you, in India, to enforce the contract, even
Mm.
Amazon's Jeff Bezos is finding it difficult to enforce the contract with the Big Bazaar right now.
Mm.
Uh, they are speaking about a technical issue. Jeff Bezos, Amazon had a contract where they say that they cannot sell the stocks without the agreement with the Amazon. Now they are saying we have not sold the stocks, we have only sold the assets. This hair splitting difference
Mm.
that they used to bypass the contract. If the richest man in the world is unable to enforce the contract, do you think that the poor farmer will be able to enforce the contract?
Mm.
Where we are asking, where are the safeguards? We are for it. We are for it. Where are the safeguards? Where are the safeguards for the security measures? What are the steps that you have taken to empower the farmer? That is completely missing in this book. That is what we are highlighting. We are all for reforms. We all want to double the farmer's income. But that is missing, and it is not an assumption. It is actually lessons learned from the studies done in different states.
Yeah. So Jayakrishna, there are also voices that come out and say, no, you guys are trying to stop the development of India. The same laws and the same kind of structure worked out somewhere else in Europe, somewhere else in forward countries, somewhere else where proper where the wealth rose. But since you guys don't want India to be like that, don't want India to be benefited out of the growth that is happening in all across the world. That is the reason you're bringing out these small petty issues and trying to keep the farmer at the lowest of their revenues. This has been you know one of the allegations. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, this is classic shoot the messenger strategy. Like whoever questions
Okay.
any kind of policy, they immediately say that that person is anti-India. That is no answer to the question raised. And
Mm.
as I'm saying, see, these are not uninformed people who are protesting. These are farmers, and when we see them talking to journalists and TV, we know how nuanced they are in their understanding. They are not speaking like ill-informed people. They know what is happening. They know how the markets work. They know the protection of the APC mandis that are already happening, and
Mm.
they trust the system that is already there. That trust is severely lacking in the new laws. That is why
Mm.
they don't want to switch, and they know they are not unaware of corporate what do you say dealings. They know, as he was saying, this they know how tough it is to enforce any kind of contract in India.
Mm.
They know how the legal system. See, the APC mandis, one of the way they redress the grievance of the farmers is if there is any price dispute, then the buyer will not be able to continue trade there. So
Mm.
that makes the buyer pay the farmers on time. So that's a very effective redressal mechanism that is lacking in the new laws. So
Mm.
even the courts are excluded, and they are saying the district magistrates will be able to address those issues. And these farmers very well know how much of what do you say a friendly system the district magistrates and the officials in the revenue department are. So they know. So it is not against. See, these are real concerns. These are
Mm.
actually in national interest. We
Mm.
want to strengthen the farmers. That's why we are saying, we are not saying don't allow them to progress. We are saying listen to them. They have wisdom. They have experience. They know how to run their field,
Mm.
their sector. They are not. They should be listened to before you tinker with the systems. That is why this is very much in national interest. Listening to the citizen is in democratic and national interest. Nobody should say that listening to the stakeholder is a bad thing in democracy. And as I said, see, democracy involves a lot of listening.
Mm.
See, there might be a group of people who sees protest as an
Mm.
inconvenience, as anti-national. That is not the case. In a democracy, when people protest, they are actually talking to the government.
Right.
You should
Right.
listen to
Right.
us, respond to us. It is a
Mm.
conversation. It is not an anti-national activity.
Mm.
Unless there is planned violence, you cannot say protest is anti-national or discussion is anti-national. Democracy, by definition, needs all this. And people, when they come in large numbers, when its livelihood matters at stake, the government should actually talk to them all the more. And it is not, see, we are all Indians. Who is anti-national here? Who is anti-national? Everybody would benefit by the country prospering. Nobody.
Mm.
That is a foolish notion that we might have. Just
Correct.
because we are discussing, just because we are taking one position, that does not make us against India. We all want India to prosper.
Let's go to Jerry Thomas for yet another question. Jerry, the similar acts and policies also exist in a lot of European countries, and a lot of Western countries have actually succeeded in bringing some kind of growth into the market, growth into the life standards of people who work in the farms. But by opposing such acts and by opposing such growth related acts, aren't we intentionally stopping the growth of India?
Thanks for that question. Especially that's a very important question. When we compare the question again assumes that capitalism is all about free market.
Mm.
It's a wrong assumption. In the sense, even when Adam Smith, who is considered as the father of economics, when he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he preceded that book with the morality of the human race, the elements of human morality. Similarly, Raghuram Rajan, who was the former governor of the RBI, who is a defender of the capitalism, when he wrote Why Capitalists Tries to Destroy Capitalism, he came back with another book. Another book he wrote about the third pillar, which is about the community. So capitalism has different elements. One is the community.
Mm.
Second is the market. Third is the state. A balance between these three communities is important for capitalism to function.
Mm.
If you have an authoritarian state, you will not have a capitalism. No state has progressed. No country in the world has become a developed nation through an authoritarian government. No nation. For example, South Korea. Take the example of South Korea. It started with a dictatorship, but then it moved to a democratic system before it became a developed country. You cannot think that you can become a developed country by following the North Korean rulership and expecting the South Korean results. You cannot. Second, community. Community is very important. The third pillar of Raghuram Rajan, the book Third Pillar of Raghuram Rajan, beautifully explains the importance of community. He in fact cites the example. For example, let us take the same farmers incident. What happened in the Europe? Raghuram Rajan gives an example of how the farmers were given the interest, the credit, the money, they require the money, right? So when the farmers were very poor, the church in Europe opposed the interest till they became sustaining. They could stand on their own. Still, they became a middle class. The church opposed the interest. After they could stand on their own, church allowed the interest, but now with a criteria that the interest should not be exploited. So this is one example from the history which Raghuram Rajan gives. He says the church changed the stand because church was speaking for the community, and because the community's economic development had happened, the church changed the stand. You don't have such strong vocal community which supports the poor people in India. That is a fact. The church in India should take that responsibility, but unfortunately, right now you don't have it. Second, Raghuram Rajan gives an example that is there right now in the US. He gives an example of a community in US which was poor, which had high rates of criminal activity, which was broken in every aspect. And he speaks about the resurrection project by a church. That resurrection project by a church, it educated the people. Like they are investing in the people to empower them. It educated the people. It gave them the loans. It supported them in the business. It counseled them. So again, the role of the active, vibrant community is a must before you can give them for the capitalist market. Second, the same thing. Raghuram Rajan also says, and there are several other historians who have pointed out. For example, David Landis, he is a Harvard professor. He is a Harvard professor who identifies himself as an atheist. He is not a Christian. He wrote a beautiful book called Wealth and Poverty of Nations on why some countries became developed, and why some countries are still poor. He identified the Western development to his understanding of human being.
Okay.
The limitation of the state. Now, this is an important point. I'm taking little time, but let me explain this also. State in the West, the power of the state was reduced by the church. If you look at the Magna Carta, the Magna Carta was written by the 13 people who, out of the 25 people, 13 people who signed the Magna Carta were the Catholic priests. It was to reduce the power of the state. Because, and again, the human rights, it was again the church. Even the King James, for example. We have King James I, who wanted to have more power. It was the church who stopped him and said, you cannot have more power. State should be limited. We have exactly the opposite happening in India. Exactly the opposite happening in India, unfortunately, because the largest NGO in India, which is the RSS. RSS has the largest NGO in India, probably in the NGO in the whole world. RSS, instead of trying to limit the government, they want the state to be an authoritative state. You see, actually, until and unless these three factors work together, a very empowering community, supportive community, a limited state, and then a fair and a just market. Praveen, let me ask you the third point. You know about our geo-reliance services, right? When geo-reliance service came, they came with a predatory pricing. Free lifetime call. Free lifetime call is a predatory pricing, textbook example of a predatory pricing to destroy competition. Now, Bharati Airtel went to Competition Commission of India, which is a commission set up by the parliament to ensure that such practices are not there. Bharati Airtel went to the Competition Commission of India. They found a loophole to allow the predatory pricing. Now, where is the fair market? Where is the just market? They said, no, Jio is not a dominant player, therefore it is not a predatory pricing. That is a very laughable way of actually putting, you are by finding loopholes to allow the predatory pricing. So you don't have an empowering community, you are working towards an authoritative state, and then you have an unfair market. How do you expect to succeed? Can you tell me just one country in the entire world, which has become a developed country with an authoritative state? No, not even China. China is still a middle class. If you want to be developed, otherwise you will be trapped in the middle class trap. If you want to be developed, your government has to be inclusive, your community has to be empowering, your market has to be fair. We have failed in all those things. What we have been earlier saying in the farm law is also, please empower the community of farmers. Please ensure that they have support. Church played that role in the West. Church played that role. As I said, in the Wealth and Poverty of Nations, David Landers, who is an atheist, who explicitly says he is not a believer. And he says, he has identified, says that it is the Judeo-Christian religious worldview that built the platform. Build it the same like that. We are not saying that, say, accept Christianity. See, if you accept Christianity, you will have eternal life. But at least if you accept the Christian principles, you have a better life in this world. For example, if I can take one example and then I will stop at this. See, for example, our Hindu friends now have monogamy. Monogamy is not a Hindu law. They have taken a Christian law, but haven't they been blessed by it? They have been blessed by it. Similarly, take the Christian principles of community, take the Christian principles of the state, take the Christian principles of the market, and implement it, you will succeed. So Western countries succeeded with a specific formula. What we have been highlighting is that specific formula is missing in now.
Okay. So Jayakrishnan, see, we are talking about what are the flaws and what are the holes in the acts that the government has introduced. But we should also suggest some kind of alternatives. What are the alternatives that we are planning to suggest to the farming community of India? Jerry is talking about an authoritarian government, but you know, the situation of the farming community was not very different in the UPA government as well. If you think that the UPA government is not authoritarian, in that case, the situation was still the same. There were so many farmers who were dying actually just because of the older laws. They were not able to feed themselves. But now there is an opportunity to feed themselves by selling their crops wherever and whenever and to whomever they want to. And now we are bringing up the authoritarian government, and because of the authoritarian government, you guys can't succeed. But what is the alternative?
See, firstly, see, I would always come back to the point of listening to the stakeholders to start with. See, and one of the things is when you say reform and these laws are actually delivering the farmers, one of the problems is you have ignored successful models. Like
Hmm.
like Punjab and Haryana, they already have very successful APMCs which are protecting the farmers, ensuring a good price, and they rely and they trust the system to protect their rights. They don't have complaints. It is farmer driven, farmer led, and the redressal, the grievance redressal mechanism is also robust. So
Hmm.
why don't you expand that to other states? See, when the farmers have already worked out a good model which works, which ensures that everybody involved is protected. Why
Hmm.
don't you expand that rather than bring in an unequal party like a corporatization of the entire farming uh, sector? Why don't you expand the existing successful models that have been proven over time? These are not you suggested in one of the questions that why don't we try it out for some time? So these are tried and tested models. These principles have been proven to be workable. So why don't you
Hmm.
expand that? So that involves listening to the farmer, listening to the
Hmm.
farmer. And as Jerry was saying, see, this limited government concept is a very Christian concept. That is something that the East has a difficulty understanding. India also, if you see the ideologies that are being spread now, they don't believe in individual rights. That is a big problem. Why are lakhs of farmers dying and nobody is caring? Nobody cares. Like lakhs of farmers have committed suicide over the last decade, but it doesn't register a note of concern in anybody's mind. So that problem is there. But India, if you see constitutionally, it is built on Christian worldview because it was through the constitution that one person, one value came into existence in India. One person
Hmm.
has equal value. Like the
Hmm.
protesting farmer on the street has one
Hmm.
vote. The president who sits in the Rashtrapati Bhavan also has one vote. So one
Right.
person has one value. So by design, Indian constitution recognizes that. But in practice, even the church is failing to see that. They are not concerned about the farmer who has committed suicide or his family
Hmm.
who is suffering. So we
Hmm.
have to bring back. See, India, because it is part of the Eastern philosophical, moorings, the tendency will be to sacrifice individuals for social concerns, social rights.
Right.
I have even heard of, I think, Sudarshan earlier, RSS Sankachalak bluntly said, we don't believe in individual rights.
Hmm.
We believe in community-based rights. So
Hmm.
that is a mistake. No country has prospered like that. No country has actually become innovative and prosperous like that. There can be examples, like Japan may be an example where the society still exerts a lot of pressure. But look at the innovation that comes out of a really free country like USA, where the individual has real liberty. So Japan can have a prosperity which is imposed, they won't take the humanity forward. So,
Hmm.
so this tendency, India is right in the middle of that. So,
Hmm.
church is the right entity, I would think, that can suggest solutions to such things and take everyone really seriously. And that is what I would suggest to the executive government also.
Hmm.
Listen to them, listen to your people. You are representing us. That is the start of the solution. Real solutions will come from the people themselves. They have elected
Right.
you. They have given power to you. Now listen to them and make modifications. Don't just throw out the whole thing outright, but listen to them. Make efforts to understand them and address. And there are already successful models functioning for many decades in India. Look at them. Why do you only listen to the corporate houses alone? That is the start. Listen to everyone. One person, one value. Whether he is the richest man in India or the poorest man in India. Listen to both of them.
Right. Right. So, Jerry, what would be your response to the same question? What are the alternatives?
Yeah, Praveen, I would take a different, slightly different stand. As capitalism itself, I don't find any fault in it. In the sense, if
Mm-hmm.
the farmers are allowed to trade freely, I don't find any fault in it. Provided, I would say that you have already taken the measures to empower them.
Mm.
You have already taken the measures to give them the credit. For example, see the earlier one we were discussing. So, the if the farmer has to sell his produce at a reasonable price to
Mm.
anybody he wants, now where will he store it? He knows that he will get a better price if he stores it for say 3 months. Now they are removing the essential commodity from the Commodity Act. You have allowed it for him to be stored, him to store it. But where will he store it? Where is the infrastructure?
Mm.
You first create the infrastructure. You first create the infrastructure for him. Infrastructure is not there. Now only corporates can build the infrastructure for themselves.
Mm.
So that is the one problem. You are not empowered him. Second, credit. He wants money. After taking the crop, he has to sow for the next year. Where will he get the money? If he has
Mm.
to get the money, he has to. The only means of him right now is to sell his produce.
Mm.
But if he gets the credit, if he gets the credit at a reasonable interest, not at an exploitative interest, at a reasonable interest, where he knows that he can make a profit out of it,
Mm.
that is also not the second, third. How will we ensure the contract? So
Mm.
at this moment, I would suggest the government to seriously look into the alternatives of empowering the community, which I am very skeptical about they doing it in a large scale because all the reforms, at least most of the reforms that we have so far seen from this government, is siding with one specific group of people.
Mm.
Andy Mukherjee in Bloomberg has written that now India's industry looks like a monopoly dashboard.
Mm.
So I'm skeptical of it. But if they are skeptical, we have a responsibility to it. I
Mm.
mean, when I say me, we, I mean the church. You take the example of Andhra itself. You are from Andhra.
Mm.
Uh, when the missionaries came to say Gundur and other places, you know they involved themselves in the building of canals, right?
Yes.
When the famine was there, when there was a say bad weather, they involved themselves in the construction of canals.
Right.
So they involved in helping the poor people to come out of the poverty.
Mm.
Now this is the time for the church to raise itself.
Mm.
If the laws are not repealed, and if the government doesn't take the necessary actions, we should step ourselves to protect the farm. How we can protect the farmer?
Mm.
We should start constructing like how they constructed the canals to for the irrigation. We should start constructing storage facilities for the farmer to store it free of cost or at
Mm.
a very marginal cost.
Mm.
So that farmer, and we should actually help the farmer to form into groups. See, in Punjab they can actually do it, but in many other places they can't.
Mm.
We should help the farmers to form a group and argue or collectively bargain with the corporate. We should
Mm.
stand with the farmer. We should find ways to businessmen to enable them to give the credit at a reasonable cost.
Mm.
So it is a time for us to seriously think, not just critique. If the government doesn't listen, or if government makes only minor amendments to please the quench the protest, we should step ourselves as the missionaries stepped themselves when there was a need, and we should be on the side of the poorest of the poor, because
Mm.
our Lord Jesus Christ said, "Whatever you do for the least of these ones, that you do it for me." Not the greatest
Mm.
of these ones, but what you do for the least of these ones is you do it for me. So now is the church response time for the church. If the government doesn't listen, for us to step and stand with the farmer in a very constructive way.
Right. So,
So
so
that
you also talked about most of the laws introduced were not accepted by people with that with the same warmth. Or are you trying to say that the reformation or the reforms that the government is bringing, they're not useful to the country?
See, every time
Are you asking me?
As advocate Jayakrishnan said, I don't want to attribute malified intention, but the results are always most of the time negative. Say
So
for example,
are you saying apart from the laws that we are discussing at this point of time, say for example laws in the agricultural sector, apart from that there were other acts and other laws also that the government of India, led by the NDA, alliance, there were many historical and many controversial laws passed. Are you saying all of them, they don't help?
I won't say all of them, but most of them or many of them. For example, you take again the example of electoral bonds. This was supposed to reform the electoral process. Reform the electoral process. Electoral bond is where the corporates can donate how much ever money they want to a political party,
Right.
without revealing the name. Earlier there were restrictions, the restrictions on how much amount that you can transfer. Now that restriction is gone. Now you will not know, other than the public sector bank which accepts this. Nobody knows who is donating to whom.
Mm.
Now the electoral bonds, it's the most opaque, non-transparent way of funding in the entire world in a democratic system. And 90%, so far as we know, 80 to 90% of the fund has gone only to one party. That is the BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party. Now they have the funds. What is the source? You and I cannot know the source. Who is funding them? Corporates are funding them. Which corporates? We do not have access to that information. Is that a reform or a deformation? It is a deformation. We have to be more transparent. But whereas we are taking one step back and we are becoming more opaque.
Yeah, Jayakrishnan, I mean, do you agree with the statement that it is not a reform, it's a deform? And these statements, I mean, do you think this statement is a little more, very, a little more critical than regular statements?
No, regarding electoral bonds, I would second that because electoral bonds are actually very you have opaque funding of political parties. That is very anti-democratic. See, my concern is not regarding many laws being passed through, but the country is becoming less democratic. That is a fact. See, even the farm bills. Why are there so many protests? Because it did not go through a deliberative process that is expected of a parliament like ours. Many of the laws are now being not sent to the committees that are supposed to deliberate over such matters. There are laws that are introduced after much study, much deliberation, sent to subject committees, and they are analyzed threadbare before they are imposed on the entire country. But now what is happening? See, they are having a voice vote, and during the shouting, they are saying the eyes are more than the nose. How can you say? So this shortcut, see, Parliament cannot become a rubber stamp. All kinds of people are represented there. They should deliberate because so many millions of people are going to be affected by every law. And look at the electoral bonds. This secret funding. What has it opened? I can buy my MP. I can buy my government, and I can buy my policy and make it law. That is what is happening. One of the defenses put forward by the by the party that introduced it was that, see, now even the opposition party can get funds without us knowing it. But no, that is not at all true. Government knows which bond is being cashed by whom, because it's a government controlled bank, and of course there are officers in India that can get to know the information. So this anonymous funding is actually hijacking of the entire democratic process itself. We don't know who is funding. Foreign forces, inimical forces can be funding our MPs. That is not good for the people who are governed. Like, so see, there was an old slogan in America which said no taxation without representation, and the same thing, no representation without transparency. Like I should know. I want to know who is funding my MP in Parliament. Where is he getting his money from? How is he putting up so much posters in my city? So I
Hmm.
would electoral bonds are one thing which is not at all a reform. Don't There is no way in which we can say it is a reform. It is actually a regress. The
What
nation is
about what about
becoming
what about
undemocratic.
what about other Citizenship Amendment Act, and what about say the demonetization? Isn't it a very dare step of reformation? What about the amendment of corporate law that I think in 2018 they did. Um, some even to the FCRI accounts. What about the amendments in the FCRI account related policies? Uh, are you saying these are not working because for some reason these are not within the they don't fall under the interest levels of your they don't fall into your interest, and is that the
No, no,
reason that you're saying no?
not that. Not just that. See, demonetization. One question is how many civilized countries have done that? How
Hmm.
many prosperous countries have done that? So you show me a responsible nation in the world that has done it. So we can get some very nations in which the democracy is hardly there. So that is one thing. Secondly, one of my major problems with that was, see, the cabinet has collective responsibility. And
Hmm.
what I have understood from the news report is that even the finance minister is not aware that the prime minister is going to announce this. So that is not the way democracy functions. Like midnight, you have a decision by one person with a few advisors. No, the cabinet has to be taken into confidence. And even that is not enough. Even if they take such a decision, that will have to be analyzed by the parliament. So just because it is a radical idea that makes sense to 10 people, that cannot be imposed on 1 billion people. That is not the way our democracy functions. So the objective itself does not save any kind of policy.
Hmm.
There are the means and the ends both should be legitimate. So that is, this shortcutting of parliament is a major thing. The bypassing of cabinets collective responsibility is a major thing. See, we are not a kingdom. We are not a bare democracy. We are a democratic republic governed by rule of law. So when there is dilution happens, we cannot say political country. Also, see, I have no problem with analysis of foreign contribution to India, but are all foreign contribution receivers being scrutinized? That is a question. I doubt that. There are NGOs which are favored in foreign contributions, and there are NGOs which are being targeted because of foreign contributions. That is not fair. That is not fair. You control it tightly. Nobody has. If it is national interest, nobody should question that. But it should be fair.
Right.
It should be fair. There should not be bias
Right.
in such policy. And
Right.
corporate laws, as far as I
Go ahead. Go ahead.
feel it, see, corporate houses are getting, yeah, that is because of electoral bonds. See, once you have funded an MP or a party using electoral bonds, they are bound to be accountable to you. You want a particular kind of opening of a sector. That is a deal being struck. Before the election, I strike the deal with the MP and the political party saying that I will fund your election machine. But once you come into power, this is the sector that I want opened up in such and such manner.
Hmm.
That is why the parliament has become a rubber stamp. You have to push through legislations without any deliberation. So who are you answerable to? Are you answerable to the citizens?
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So coming
Or
back
are you
to
answerable to your
Jerry.
funding agent?
Right. Right. I got your point. So coming back to Jerry. Jerry, this must be probably the last question that I will be asking you, both of you actually. Um, so we have seen that a lot of deliberations try to happen between the farmers and the government. We have seen that they were not willing to give up their ground at this point of time. It's a chilly winter time in Delhi. It is really really very cold in those areas, and they are willing to go through those tough situations, taking the cold water on them, not having proper shelter on their heads, and trying to cook whatever they can eat right on there on the roads, and they started actually living there. And but the government seems to take some initiative. They tried to speak to them, and there was a deliberation that happened. People came, they sat together, they talked, and but even after that, in general, the present government, the NDA government, doesn't actually stoop down. And knowing that history, after the appeals of the state, after the appeals of various ministers, including Prime Minister, the farmers are not willing to give up their ground. Jerry, what do you think the reason is? Why that adamant attitude? Can there be a little bit of consideration from both sides and stop this this kind of protests?
Praveen, thank you for asking that final question. In fact, that comes back to the earlier point of deliberation. See, first of all, this bill was passed without any deliberation, without any discussion with the stakeholders. Second, this is a life and death issue for the farmer. They have already seen it in Bihar. They have seen it with the rice, what happened to the Bihar farmer. The Bihar farmer has not progressed, but he has only been in poverty. They are wondering, they have raised these questions, why there is no security measures to protect them. There is no safety net for them. If something fails, where will they go? So it is a life and death issue. And as I said at the beginning, the draft is so badly drafted. I do not know how they will amend it and make it better. It is better to repeal it, have discussion, deliberations, and bring a new law, farm law, for the real progress of the farmers. So I think there is a genuine case when you are actually cornered, when you have nothing else to be left, when it is a life and death issue, you will not go back on saying that, okay, let's say deliberation. It is the responsibility of those in power to stoop down. See, that never happens. That never crosses the mind. Again, it comes back to the worldview. See, to serve the least of this, when you actually look at the Christ, see, Christ would actually stoop down to wash the feet of the disciples. So those in power should be the servant of the least of the one. That idea has never crossed the mind of the government. So you have a democratic setup. You have prime minister, supposedly prime minister, one who is supposed to serve, or the ministers who are supposed to be ministering. But they are becoming like kings. So the entire question is, why not the farmer? It is not a question of the powerless. It is the question of those who are in power, for them to show that they are there, wielding the power to serve and not to dictate. So it is the other way that you should ask. When the lags are in cold, why are not those in power listening to them? That should be the question that we should be asking. That is the paradigm that we have.
Right. Adding to the same question, what do you think is the responsibility of the Christian community at this point of time? How do you foresee that the Christian community can support this cause in this way? Is it really relevant? Is it really possible?
Yeah. See, Christian community, it's actually one of the most dedicated communities in India. For example, if they take up creating the awareness, they take it at this stage, at the protest stage, they can actually create awareness, like just now, like how you are doing, to educate the public. Because see, 90% of the media channels are owned by one corporate group. None of them will highlight the real problems. The farmers are complaining about it. Farmers are really complaining about the mainstream media coverage. Right. So through the social media, the Christian community at this point can take up the responsibility of creating awareness, building up the consciousness. Now, if that doesn't work, we have to create the infrastructure for the farmer. There are educated people in our community who can actually vet the contract that the corporate is giving. And see that there are no footnotes in there which will actually put the farmer into trouble. So you have to be the advocate of the poor. You have to stand and defend the poor right now. It is the responsibility, historical responsibility of the church. If the government doesn't repeal the law, it is our historical responsibility to stand with the poorest of the poor and defend the poor. If we don't do that, we have failed as a church. There is no point in blaming the government. We have a mandate from the Bible to stand with the poor. Now, at the protest, our support is of one type. After the protest, if the laws are not repealed, if there's only tweak and still biased against the farmer, we have to ensure that we create those systems to help the farmer. It is a kind of a we build up again the business for the farm. That
Right.
is a, we have to think of deliberate and take constructive actions.
Right. Right. So Jayakrishna, same question to you with an added little bit of an added extra, insights that I would love to hear from you for the audiences. What are the three things, simple three things, that the farmer is afraid of, for which he is on the roads in Delhi for the past 1.5 months? He's been doing this in Punjab, and now he reached Delhi, and it's been 10 days now. How? What are those three things that he's afraid of? And what can we do as a community?
I don't know about three things, but I think, see, as Jerry brother was saying, this is life and death issue for them. So they fear for their livelihood. They fear debt. See, once this Sainath and all have studied these cotton farmers, they get into debt by the debt in one season. One season will put them into a cycle of debt from which they never recover. So
Okay.
even the farmers, especially the small holding farmers, their fear is that once they get into the debt trap, they will never be able to come out. They don't have that kind of flexibility with the finances. And I think that is livelihood and debt trap. Both those things are concerning them very badly. And I don't know. I am not a farmer. I confess my weakness in. I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
know three things that concern them. That is
Right.
my failure, and we don't know who is feeding us, who is actually now sustaining the economy. But for the farm sector, the economy would have bottomed out fully. So this is one situation we are all facing. And one thing I wanted to add was, see, the prime minister would only increase in stature if he takes leadership and listens to the farmer in this. If he repeals a law listening to the farmer, he will not lose anything. He will actually come across as a gracious man who listens to his people. But that is something that the Indian psyche refuses to understand. They think that the strong man is the leader. No, it is a serving man who is a leader, which is an example of our Lord, as he rightly said. So I think the prime minister the government can have actually a legacy which will stand the test of time if they
Right.
listen to the people, the poorest people. They will lose nothing. They will actually, their support base will increase. But if they fight it, they will stand to lose now and also in the judgment of history. Like we read about so many instances in history, we wonder what went through these leaders' minds. But we have some such. So this is a great occasion for the prime minister and the government and the parliament to actually show the people that they care. And the church also, like he said, whatever be the decision regarding the laws, this is an occasion for the church to serve the community. I think that is what I think, even the message that I would give myself. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Very, very well said. Very well said. This is a great occasion for the leadership of the country, especially the Prime Minister of India, to step up to the situation and address the situation rather than keeping the silence and sending some kind of deliberations to address the issue. He, listening to his people, serving his people, will definitely make his stature much higher than in the contrary, people may think that it may lower. Actually, in reality, if you listen to your people, if you listen to the heart, the cry of their heart, you will be more of a well accepted leader in this actual tight situation. Well, that's it for now, and we will meet again next week with yet another very interesting topic. But also, please be aware that on 8th of this month, which is the next coming Tuesday, we will be having a very interesting discussion with LT Jayachandran Garu and Paul Balasundaram Garu on Christmas, the King and the Kingdom. The Christmas, the King and the Kingdom. We will be discussing a very interesting point, very interesting dimensions of the kingdom of God, and very interesting dimensions of the kingship of God, Lord Jesus, and the relevance that it brings to the celebrating hearts in the Christmas season. So keep watching Rakshana Television, and don't forget to watch it online if you're away from the television, especially on Tuesday, which is the 8th of this month. Thank you very much for watching. Keep praying and keep supporting Rakshana Television. Thank you.